This is the Tabernacle Podcast with our guest, Todd Heminger, and me, John Vermilia. What's up, Todd?
Not too much. Just living life.
Living life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I've been looking forward to this. We've been planning this for several months.
Right.
I think the first time. Yeah, we talked about it a few months ago. But let me start with how we know one another. My daughter, Sophie, who is a senior at the time of this recording at Taylor University, is very good friends with your son, Caden.
Yep.
And through their friendship, through their relationship, just probably last fall, she sent me a text and said, Dad, I really think you should get Todd on this podcast. He's got an amazing story. And so we've had a chance to talk just a little bit. And thanks for coming on and sharing your it's a changed life story, but it's super powerful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it ever since we talked about it.
Yeah. So just a little bit about you, like where were you from? How did it all begin? Just give people a sense of who you are. And
Yeah, so I grew up in Rockford, Michigan. Lived there pretty much my whole life. Still live there. So I grew up in so I had three sisters, one older, two younger, and great parents, loving Christian home. You know, my parents just always made sure we had everything we needed. You know, kind of I don't say typical, like I don't like that, but you know, it was a good, very safe place to grow up. You know, we never had any money, but we never lacked anything. My parents did a great job with that. My dad was always working two jobs, you know, killing himself to make sure we had what we needed and never complained. So it just taught me a lot of that, you know, just hard work ethic, take care of your family. And my mom too, just, you know, taking care of us and making sure we always had what we needed. So I went to Little Baptist Church in Rockford.
Nice.
And so because I grew up in the church, you know, I don't have any memory of ever not believing in God. It just was, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, just very safe, not a lot of trauma or anything in my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 6, prayed the prayer of salvation for the first time, you know, one of those.
Me too.
Kept praying it over and over.
Yeah.
But
you got to make sure.
Yeah. And then when I was 11, I got baptized. So I feel like, you know, up until my 20s, my life basically progressed along the pathway I figured it would progress, you know, childhood, high school, get married, have kids, you know, it's just whatever I would have thought of was going to happen was just kind of what happened, you know.
Yeah, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Did you go away to college or anything like that when you graduated? Or
so from the time that I was about 13 or 14, I just wanted to be an adult.
Yeah.
Like I was done with school. So I started working, doing yard work for people and stuff. I worked a lot in high school. So I knew I didn't want to go to college. And so at the time, just talking to guidance counselors and stuff, you know, it's like, oh, well, you should go into a trade. That's great, you know, great business. So I just chose electrical that sounds good, you know.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I went to
job security.
Kent Skills Center, you know, so 2 years I was there 3 hours a day in that school, back and forth. So, I think I graduated in 92. And I walked from my graduation on a Friday, and then on Monday I started work, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I also moved out of the house, got an apartment, or actually rented the house with a buddy. Not because anything was bad at home. I just wanted to be an adult. I wanted to be my own person, you know, be independent.
Take responsibility. Let's go. Yeah.
And so along with that, I would say I grew up with a very strong sense of very deep reverence for God, very strong sense of right and wrong, you know. But there was a point through high school where I never strayed from any of that, but just feeling like I was kind of lukewarm, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of normal, like junior high school. I just wanted to disappear. So I very much tried to just stay out of the way, not pay no attention to me, just, you know. And so I always felt guilty, like maybe I should be doing more. You know, what if I died right now? Am I doing enough? You know, that kind of thing. So I decided when I was 17, I was going to switch churches and just kind of break away from my parents and just because I wanted to figure out for myself.
That's natural.
Make it real. Yeah.
You wanted your faith to be your faith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was very cerebral and very much, I had a lot of fear of God, not in a negative way, but just very reverential, but it wasn't really personal necessarily. Yeah. And so I switched. It was still a Baptist church, but a different church in Rockford that was bigger, and it's a church we go to now. And when I went there, I got into like a college group, and there was a couple of men, one in particular named Eric, that just mentored me. Yeah. He had me over, like I ate dinner with his family one day a week, and we do Bible studies together, talk about theology, things like that. And I just really just fell in love with the Bible more. I didn't learn anything new, but it just kind of solidified what I already believed. So that was a big change for me, just making it more my own and feeling like I could defend it better, feeling like it was more personal.
Yeah, and groups always seem to do that. We're experiencing that right now at our church, where we've just had a new focus on groups, men's groups, women's groups, couples groups, and you just see people grow. Yeah. And so now you're making your faith your own, you're starting to grow. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like discipleship to me.
Yeah, really it was. And I had a little bit of that in high school and stuff like that, but I think just as an adult, it was just different. Yeah. I was more serious about it. Yeah. And so when I was about 21, so it would have been like 96, something like that. I was renting a house south of Grand Rapids with my brother-in-law. He wasn't married yet, so he was engaged to my sister, and so we were living in the house, and so we were commuting back to Rockford for church, and he's like, "Oh, there's this new church in Hudsonville that's really edgy, more seeker-friendly, but the church services are like a rock concert, And back then,
young adults,
like mid-90s,
great place to meet people.
Just like, wow, we should try this out. Because nowadays every church is like that. But back then, for a church to turn off the lights during worship and have rock and roll, that was really unusual.
That was
so
right on the cutting edge, man. For the worship revolution,
right? Yeah. So the first Sunday we went there was him and me and my sister, and we walk in, and it was after church. We were standing in the lobby, and this young woman comes over. Starts talking to us. Hi, I'm Veronica, and I work with the student ministry here. And so she's just asking us tons of questions. And initially, I think she's just looking for recruits, looking for people that she'd never seen us before. And so we talked for quite a while. And while we're talking, she's asking me tons of questions about my life. And she had said, I think I just told her, she's like, "What do you do? What do you like to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I go to coffee houses a lot and just sit around and hang out with friends and stuff." So I told her about a coffee house in Grand Rapids I went to a lot. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I know that one. That's great." So I just kind of didn't think about it again. And she was like 3.5 years older than me. And so I'm thinking this is like one of the pastor's wives or something, And so we're walking out, and my brother-in-law is like, "That girl's really into you, And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like totally clueless on that.
You weren't fishing. You were there to church, be discipled, and
like,
have rock worship.
"Oh, she's older than me. It's not, whatever." Yeah. So then a couple days later, I'm at the coffee house, and she walks in, and like, holy cow, she came, But she just she waves at me from across the room, and then she sits at a different table by herself and just starts reading the book, And so I get up and go over there, and just oblivious, like, oh, she's here to see me, Yeah. So I go and just sit down, start talking to her, and it's just like, it's a table with 2 chairs, So we're talking for a while, and we're getting along, and it's great. And it was maybe 15, 20 minutes. This guy comes over, and I didn't see him where he came from, but he comes over and he just sits down, and I don't even remember what he said. But I'm just like, oh, this is one of her friends. And so we're just sitting there hanging out, talking, the 3 of us. And I didn't know, and she didn't tell me that. She didn't tell me for a while. I can't remember exactly when she told me, but she was on a blind date, and he had chosen that place. And so... But
she didn't crash the blind date.
Yeah. But she didn't make it weird. She didn't even say anything. She's just like, okay, whatever, And so after like 20 or 30 minutes, he's like, "Oh, I got to go," and he leaves. And so her and I just stay for like 3 more hours talking.
Wow.
And I never talked to one person
This is a crash. This is a crash of the blind date.
Yeah.
And weak link took off. And it's just you and her.
Yeah.
I love it.
That wasn't meant to be, but yeah. So we basically close the place down just talking. I never talked for 4 hours to one person before. No matter what I said, like no matter how much we talked, I just felt like I never knew enough. I just wanted to know more. I wanted to know more. And so yeah, we started dating.
And this is Veronica.
Yeah, so it's Veronica. I don't remember exactly the process of how quickly we went on another date and all that.
Yeah.
But we started dating. I started serving at, she roped me into the youth, youth group stuff. And I was a drummer. So I started playing drums in the youth band. And, just.
I didn't know you were a drummer.
Yeah.
Wow.
I haven't played for a while. My son, Levi, our youngest, plays now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there was a spot for me. So I jumped in and started doing that. And so
you're dating the leader or one of the leaders in the student ministry.
Yeah.
Playing drums. You're involved, and you had no intentions, but all of a sudden you're dating, like you've met a girl that loves Jesus.
Yeah.
Blonde.
Yep. No, she had brunette hair.
Brunette.
So
yeah.
And it was just funny.
Was she from Rockford as well?
No, so she grew up in Hudsonville.
Or in Hudsonville. Okay.
And it's funny because you have like a picture in your mind of the person you think you're going to marry, and I had always thought blonde, blue eyes, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dutch.
She's got brown hair, brown eyes. But like she was the person that I was supposed to be with, and so we knew pretty quick that we wanted to be married. I think it was probably just around a year.
Yeah.
Of dating, got married. Just ended one of those kind of sweet spots in life where it was just, we didn't have kids right away. So we were just serving 3-4 nights a week. We're at church just nonstop. We were doing a bunch of overseas mission trips to Europe, taking the kids, running youth camps over there.
Yeah.
Just whatever we wanted to do because it was just young married couple, And so we'd always talked about, when we first started hanging out and got married, Veronica was like, I'm never having kids. I don't want kids, And I was just kind of like, I had always thought I'd had kids, but, I'm like, oh, whatever, we'll figure that out. And so I think 3.5 years or so into the marriage, she's like, I think I want to have kids because it's like, I don't want to be old and have no one around, I want to have a family. And so 2001, our first son, Jonah, was born. And so we had, like a lot of young couples probably, we're like, oh, this isn't going to change us at all.
Oh, yeah.
We'll keep doing everything we do.
We're never going to have a
just
minivan.
bring a kid with us. What's the big deal? And obviously everything changes, And so, and all in a good way, like an amazing way. But, we definitely can't do all the things we used to do. But we kept serving, kept doing whatever.
Right.
And we had bought a house in Grand Rapids. And so it was about this time, I think Jonah was like 6 months old. And Veronica had never had any health issues, nothing, like totally healthy. And so it was, I don't know the exact date or anything, but one night, middle of the night, I wake up and I thought she's having a seizure. Her body's shaking. She's like foaming at the mouth, breathing really hard. Her body's all rigid, And so it wakes me up and I'm yelling at her and trying to figure out what's going on. And then she just stops. And so I don't remember. I know I shook her. I think I pounded on her chest a few times. And she kind of wakes back up and starts breathing again. But her whole body is just exhausted. Like she couldn't even stand up. So I can't remember who took Jonah, but I had to carry her to the car, drive her to the hospital. And so for a couple of days, they're running tests and can't find anything wrong. And
not an epileptic seizure.
No, it wasn't a seizure.
But some
it can't even explain anything. There's no like nothing in her body shows why anything happened. And because you have a heart attack or anything like that, they would be able to see things in the blood and all that. But so I can't remember how long. Like it was a couple days, and then she went home, but they kept doing more tests. And a couple weeks later, it happens again. But the second time, it's shorter. She wakes up on her own. I think she went to work that day. Like it was just like it wasn't that big of a deal. And we're like, wow, that was weird, but it wasn't that bad this time. So like, maybe it's fine. And so after a few months, Veronica's like, I'm sick of being tested. They can't find anything. All they could figure out is her heartbeat was weird.
Okay.
And I think they called it a bigeminal heartbeat. So it's like dogs have a different heartbeat than humans. It was basically like a dog heartbeat. But they're like, well, she had a heart murmur when she was an infant. So something.
But they're just baffled.
But yeah, and I think they probably would have kept running more tests, but it was like they weren't finding anything. She's like, I've lived with it my whole life. So yeah, we just go back to life. We decided we didn't want to raise kids in Grand Rapids, and we'd always thought that when we bought the house. So we start looking around. We find a house in Rockford and move to Rockford, and so it was really hard to leave our church in Daybreak, but or Daybreak was the church in Hudsonville. Really hard to leave, but we're commuting 50 minutes with a kid, trying to serve in the youth, So we had heard about a church in Rockford called Bridgeway, and kind of similar to Daybreak, but anyway, kind of a newer church. Started meeting in the school. So we go one Sunday, and it's just one of those things where it was like there were two holes missing in the church that we fit into.
Wow.
Like God just had spots for us. Like they needed a drummer. I jumped right on the worship team, started playing drums. It just fit. And
was she still doing student ministry at the time?
So so Bridgeway was a smaller church, so there wasn't a lot of students. So she did a little bit of student ministry, and then we kind of jumped into some other stuff. We were helping with, we called it programming. So it was basically just planning out the Sunday services, music and dramas and whatever. So we both were on that team. We just we got super close to the staff there, just jumped in.
It just felt like home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, same thing as Daybreak. We just found one of those sweet spots again, things are going great.
I wish, this is total aside, this is for the podcast family, but if you're listening, find your sweet spot within the church because we could use your help.
Yeah, that's right.
Because, in honesty, that's where growth and discipleship really happen, when you're invested.
Yeah.
And so you're just continuing that trend. So the lead pastor and me couldn't miss the opportunity to just say, hey, listen, if you want to grow, that's how it goes. But sorry.
No, I agree. And that's when I've had the most growth, and it's when you make the most connections with people. And, even, we have friends that are struggling with different things in life, and you don't have a church family who supports you, Right. And so, so then I'm trying to think. So the next thing along the line would have been Caden.
Yeah.
So 2004, Caden's born. And
so how old is Jonah?
So Jonah is 3.5.
3.5.
Yep.
Okay. Nice space.
Yeah. 3.5. Because he was 2001 to 2004.
We got this figured out. Let's have another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, we got the first one figured out. Things are going pretty good. Let's have one more and then we'll be done, or whatever. And, we think we have all the plans figured out. But so Jonah comes along, same thing, just fitting him into the family and all that. So he was born in June. So at this point, we've completely forgotten about anything with her heart, with her.
So no other issues.
No other issues
3 years.
for 3.5 years. Yeah, nothing.
Wow.
So, so coming up on Halloween of that year, and Halloween was Veronica's favorite holiday. So she would so I should go back. Veronica was she was the life of the party. Right? She was the person that any room she was in, she was the center of attention. Not because she was trying to be. She just had one of those charismatic.
She just had a charismatic.
Yeah, people just gravitated. She never met a stranger. And so wherever you went, I was very introverted. I still am, and I was just along for the ride. And so she would go all out with Halloween costumes, and she would create a character, and she'd stay in it all night. And
like a cosplay almost.
Yeah, she was very into it. So we had a college and career kind of group at Bridgeway, and so it's kind of some young marrieds and singles and stuff like that. So we were doing a Halloween party, and so Veronica's parents took the boys, and we go to the party, and she's the life of the party, has a great time. Come home, and we hang out in the house. I think it was I kind of forgot about this till just now, but like she was just always doing stuff, So if she come home, it's like midnight, and she's like cleans the carpet because something that's spilled on it. I mean, so it's like 2:00 in the morning when we go to bed or whatever, and then not very long after we fall asleep, I wake up and she's having another one, and
another
one of these
seizure.
episodes.
Wow, yeah.
And obviously, like I said, I had forgotten about it, and it's like, holy cow, what's happening? And it was, I don't know if I would like to say this one seemed different, but I just probably because I hadn't seen it in so long, I don't know. But she, it felt very similar to the other ones, except she didn't come out of it. Like she sort of stopped having whatever the episode was, and then she's just unconscious. And I couldn't wake her up. And so, I'm trying to, whatever I can do to wake her up, thinking, well, she's just unconscious, whatever, So I call my mom, who like just because who do you call? And
that's what my kids would do.
Yeah.
She's a medical expert.
Right?
Yeah.
And she's like, hang up and call 911. So I call 911, and she's like, oh, is she breathing? Does she have a pulse? I'm trying to check her. I'm like, I don't know. I think she's breathing. I couldn't tell. At no point in my thinking was I thinking she was gone. Like, I'm just like, she's just unconscious, something, And paramedics come right away, and they instantly put her on the floor and start doing CPR. And, it's hard to remember like what your mindset was at the time, but I should have obviously like, well, they're doing CPR. That means that she's gone. But in my brain, I never thought that she was, what I'm saying? Like I'm thinking, get her heart beating, get her on machines, let's just figure out what's going on. And so I'm like pacing the house and trying to figure out, like just thinking of all the stuff in my head that's going to happen, what's triggering from this, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed, And my parents show up, and they worked on her for quite a while. And I remember they kept shocking her heart. And like I said, if I had put 2 to 2 together, not that it would have mattered.
No, you're in.
But I'm just like, you're kind of just in shock.
This is traumatic. Yeah, you're total shock here.
And I was like, we got to the hospital and figure out what's going on. And, ER was one of our favorite shows back then, so they always hook them up to a machine. They always, run tests, whatever. Yeah. So we follow the ambulance to the hospital, and, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. So it's like skeleton crew there. They put us in this little tiny waiting room in the basement. So we're just waiting down there for a while. Doctor comes in, and it's a doctor and like an intern, and he starts talking about all this stuff. He's like asking us tons of questions. Like, I think he was stalling. I don't know, because he asked a lot of questions that in retrospect didn't make a difference,
Right.
But finally he says, well, we did everything we could, but her heart never restarted, and she's gone. And that was the first time,
wow,
in my brain that it was even a concept. And
and how old are you at this point?
So I was 30.
You're 30. She's 33.
33 and a half, yeah.
And you've been married 13 years?
No, it was like 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah. And so, Jonah's 3.5, Caden's 5 months old, and so everything just comes crashing down, And
you're a single dad in that moment.
Yeah.
2 boys, the love of your life,
right,
gone.
And just like that, when you're not even thinking, it's not like she had been sick or anything. And so I feel like at that point, there was this like half an hour time period where I felt I was like being crushed. Like I just felt like a physical presence on me. And so I don't know if this is how they normally do it or if it was just because it was the middle of the night, but the nurses were just kind of like, all right, well, we need you to fill out paperwork and identify our body and all this. Like they're just moving on. And so far it's just me and my parents. Like nobody else is even, I think my mom may have been trying to text people, I don't remember, but so they want me to come down the hall by myself and, do the clerical stuff. And so I'm like, I'm not ready, So I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I go into the bathroom, and it's just one of those little single stall ones.
Yeah.
So I go in there, and I was just feeling like crushed.
I can't even imagine.
Completely. And I don't think I even prayed anything. It was just, Lord, help me. I can't do this, And instantly it was like, whew. And I'm like, okay, God, like I knew I had had a lot of experiences in life where I felt God's presence. God did things prior to this, but if there was a moment of feeling, of knowing that it's, what I'm saying? Like it was confirmation, like, okay, he's here.
Yeah, because that was a prayer.
Yeah.
Lord, I need you. I can't do this.
Yeah. And it wasn't like he gave me any answers, but it was like, okay, now I can move on to the next thing, And so everything kind of happened quickly after that. I had to go down the hallway. I'm seeing her body laying there. And, I don't think, like I said, you're not really processing things at that point. Right. It's just kind of like,
grief hasn't even, you've been hit by the grief truck, but it hasn't even really hit you yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I come out of that room and I can hear, so while this is happening, Veronica's parents had arrived and gone into the room with my parents and been told. And so there, I hear her mom screaming, and then her brother and her sister are there.
Oh, man.
It's just, so now all of a sudden you're reliving it because other people are finding out,
Yeah.
So at some point we get back, I went back to her parents' house because the boys were there. And I don't remember, I just fell asleep at some point, right? I don't know. I don't remember exactly how it all worked out, but get up the next day and now I've got to tell Jonah.
Yeah.
And it's just this whole process. And so I want to stop too right here because I was thinking about this today. It's interesting because there was that period of time at the hospital where I think things were kind of just moving in slow motion. But from the moment that God took that away, everything was hyper-focused for me. Like, it's funny because I do grief share classes at church, and I've heard tons and tons and tons of people's stories. And one of the things people will say a lot of times is, I was just in a fog. People had to tell me what to eat. I didn't know what day of the week it was, for 6 months.
Right.
Or,
I've heard that.
Those kind of things. That wasn't my situation. For whatever reason, everything got super focused. And I was very aware of every single thing that was happening. Like things got more clear.
Yeah.
And I was recognizing all the stuff. Like life was good, good job, good wife, two kids, good church. I had nothing to be, upset about. But part of that is then you're just kind of like complacent. You know what I mean? Like I felt like everything suddenly made more sense. Like
Well, you'd even shared in your childhood. No trauma. Good home. Learned a hard work ethic. They introduced me to Christ.
Yeah. And up to this point, everything had gone according to script, or whatever. And now all of a sudden it's not. And I think I told you when we met the first time, I always tell people, like, I feel like everything I knew about God and everything I experienced was like this parachute on my back, And
I remember that.
And when Veronica died, it's like someone pushed me off a cliff and I'm falling and I'm pulling this cord and I'm like, I hope this works,
Yeah.
And
that's a great word picture.
And then it did. Like everything that I thought God was going to do, he did. But it pointed out all the stuff in my life that was wrong. Just like I'm missing stuff. I'm not, like, what am I really living for? I'm doing what it looks good, what looks right, but my heart's not in it.
The perspective with a parachute on your back on the cliff is different from, I just got pushed and now I'm trusting the parachute. It's two totally different perspectives.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
one
now
you're
you're
imagining.
Like, now I'm thinking up to this point, the decisions I made, were determining where I was heading in life.
Yeah.
But we don't have any control. Like we think we do, but we don't, and suddenly something's taken from you and you realize it was an illusion, and now everything else from this point forward is like whatever God wants me to do because he just took this away. You know what I mean? Like he just like, I'm just going to go where's the next step? Where's the next step?
Yeah.
And I felt like the whole process from that point on was just sort of like taking the next step.
Yeah.
And
so like where were you at with your grief? People talk about the stages of grief. You could probably, if you lead the grief share groups at your church,
right?
You could probably say them better than I could. But there's the shock part. There's the sadness or the depression part. There's the anger,
right?
And then we work to acceptance, and they never come in a straight line.
Right.
Like, did you experience all those stages, or?
I don't know. It's hard because, you always talk about stages, but then they're not linear.
Yes.
And so I feel like I went through 2 or 3 of them that first night.
Yeah.
And for me, I never had anger.
Really?
I would say I had lament.
Yeah.
Which is, different. I was upset at what happened, at the reality of sin and the reality of this is what happens in life, but not like angry at God,
Right.
Nothing like that. My journey is weird because I feel like for whatever reason, God brought me through it in a different way. And that's part of what I would get to later in our discussion, but that we all have unique stories, and the church needs your story, because they're all unique. And, but I was noticing that whatever path I was on was different than other people,
right?
Like significantly different. And I don't think it had a lot to do with me. It was God's plan.
Yeah.
And, I went to some, like secular grief classes, like stuff the hospital recommended or whatever. And I remember sitting in one of those meetings, and there were people, there was no God in those meetings. It was just, how do you get through grief?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there, and there was people who were like 3, 4, 5 years removed from spouses dying and things like that. And they were just a mess. And I'm like already ahead of these people, in my head, I'm thinking, they don't have God. Like, where's their hope? And so,
Well said. Yeah.
So I think that I just wanted to take advantage of whatever he's trying to teach me, whatever I'm supposed to be doing. I want to do that. And, I don't know. I think maybe it's just the way my brain works as far as like efficiency, and not efficiency necessarily, but like just things being orderly. Yeah. And I want to learn what I need to learn from this experience, like any experience in my life. If something happens, your disappointment happens, you can sit there and you can complain about it or be upset about it, or you just figure out how to move on. Right. And how to make the most of it or whatever. And so, it was around that same time when I was getting tons and tons of like support from Bridgeway, just like overwhelming support, cards and money and meals and just everything. And
so the church showed up.
They really,
yeah.
And I mean, I had to cut them off from bringing me meals at a year because they just,
a year.
It was,
wow.
And part of that's because of what we're going to keep talking about with Jonah. But someone sent me one of the cards I got. I don't remember who sent it to me, and I was thinking the other day, I need to try to find my pile of cards from that time frame and see if I can figure it out. But the cards, and I won't get it perfect, but on the front it said something like, "God will get you through this, not somehow, but triumphantly." And that became my mantra, And I even started, I wrote a little blog, and it was called The Freedom of Faith, and then I was trying to triumph. I was just trying to, because I'm like, how do you figure out, how do you triumph through something? How do you, And to me, it was, I want to come out of this the best shape possible. People, everything we go through, you get cut, you get a scar. Your cut doesn't bleed forever, but there's a scar there to remind you that it happened, but it shouldn't hurt forever, right? And but I think with grief and things like that, we can get caught up where it defines us. Yeah. And so I'm like, I say this to the grief share people, you feel awful. You're like, I don't want to live here. This can't be the rest of my life. You know? And so how do I move past that? And how do I learn what I'm supposed to learn? And how do I triumph and get to the point? I think you have to be able to get to a point where you say your life's better off for having gone through what you went through. And then you know you're healed.
That's a mature thing to say. I mean, spiritually, that's the right thing to say, even if when you say it, you don't feel mature. Right.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying that right away.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But that was in my head. I'm like, that's when I can get to that point. I'm healed. And so basically, going back to where I was in the story. So Jonah, that was probably one of the hardest things in the whole process. Yeah, explaining that to him. We had just lost a dog, so it's kind of like, guilt is in heaven, and he just
For
kind
a
of
3.5-year-old,
yeah,
that's traumatic. You just lost your dog, but now you lost your mom.
right. And he didn't know what to do with it. I think he hit me a lot, cried a lot, and then ended up hugging me. It's one of those things where he's like,
he didn't
you're
know where
delivering
to
the
put all
bad news, but you're also my dad. And so there was a period of like something changed. Like, he didn't know how to process it. There was like, I would say like a spark went out in his eye, kind of like something. He would have eventually healed from it, but it was harder on him because he doesn't know what's going on.
We have a 3.5-year-old granddaughter, and so I'm just envisioning her without. Yeah.
And so
I cannot imagine.
So we kind of just get back to life. I'm a single dad now. I got to keep working. I really felt like it was important to keep structure for the boys. Can't have too many things change at once, I probably made a bunch of mistakes. I don't know, but I was like, I need to try to keep something consistent, and I got to pay the bills, right? So so I go back to work, and my bosses I have amazing bosses, the same people I still work for. They just were like, whenever you want to come back, whatever, they were just really whatever I needed, and so I kind of started out a little bit less hours and kind of built up, and so we kind of just settled into a new kind of normal routine. And Christmas, Thanksgiving came up, Christmas. Yeah.
Because the funeral would have been in November, beginning of November.
Yeah, because it was October 31st when she died. And then, so, that stuff came quick. And once again, it's one of those things where a lot of people that are going through grief dread the holidays. For me, I loved it because I was around people. Like, it brought us together. Yeah. And God did some amazing things with my family, with Andrea's Veronica's family. Everybody was on the same page. Like, we all grieved differently, but there was never any dissension there. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's just you're grieving, we were going through this together.
Let everybody grieve how they're going to grieve. Yeah, that's good.
And so so we just kind of came together, and there was those 2 holidays were just kind of a time to reminisce and talk about Veronica and remember things. And even her funeral, I was like, it needs to be a celebration because that's who she was, And I remember even the worship leader at the time, I was telling him what songs I wanted to sing and things like that, and he's like, "Are you sure? Like, are you sure?" I'm like, this is what she would want. Like, she doesn't want us to sit around and cry about her. She want, and who knows if this is just me trying to make the best decisions I can make.
She's with Christ.
Yeah. So I said, it's a celebration. She's in heaven. Like, we can spend a bunch of time worried about what she's missing out on. Like, she's not missing out on anything, know?
Yeah.
And so,
that's a biblical perspective.
so we did, we kept, like I said, moved on. It wasn't very long. So we kind of got through the holidays, got into winter. And there was a lot of cool stuff happening, like just people in the community. I was hearing about all these people praying for me that I didn't even know, a lot of stuff like that. And I even had, it was interesting because, so I'm pretty sure this was before the accident. A reporter called me from the Grand Rapids Press, and I think someone from our church knew someone or something. And she's like, I want to do a story on, what's going on in your life. And so we talked, and she interviewed me, and then she called me back up, and she's like, well, I wrote the story, I presented it to my editors, and she's like, they won't print it. And I'm like, what do you mean they won't print it? She's like, well, they just think you're in denial, and it's not real.
Oh, wow.
And
too much God in it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so,
I'm guessing, I'm speculating.
Right. But. And so, it was fine. It didn't really matter, but it's just like a lot of, obviously spiritual resistance coming because we were thriving through it, and so at that time, so Tim Nelson was the pastor at Bridgeway. Him and I were really good friends. So he kept saying, well, I really want to, do a service where you share your testimony, and we just, interview you and talk about Veronica, because she was a big part of the church. Yeah. Like, it was like everybody lost her. It wasn't, and so we were trying to figure out what that looked like. And I was at work one day, and I'm just, putting a service on a house, And I'm just thinking about stuff. And all of a sudden, God just like dumps this information in my brain about what it would look like. And Easter's coming up. And I'm like, it's Easter. Like, we need to do an Easter service. Like, I'll share my testimony at Easter. That's when, it's, redemption and all this other stuff, And so I had all these thoughts. And I text Tim, and I'm like, hey, we got to meet. I got to tell you something about something, So we walk into this coffee shop and sit down, and he's like, before you say anything, let me tell you, because he's like, I have an idea. And so he lays out this plan for the service, and it's exactly what I was going to say.
Wow.
And it's like, this is it. This is what we're supposed to do. And this was like just a couple weeks before Easter. It was really close.
Wow.
And so we leave there, it's a Friday, leave there like on cloud nine, And
he was thinking Easter too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. It was like
wow,
exactly
cool.
the same thing. And because and they had done in the past, they'd done like they were meeting in the school, but then they would do these bigger services in the gym and bigger holidays and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's gonna be in the gym and all this other stuff. And so so I go home, get through the weekend. So Sunday, get up and go to church with the boys. And it's one of those like, it's February. So I guess Easter was a little, I know Easter's different every year. So it might have been a month away.
It's either in March or
close, yeah.
April, yeah.
And so it's the very end of February, and we're driving, and it's been sort of warm for a little bit, and so there's not really a lot of snow on the ground, but there's black ice everywhere. But I didn't experience any of it driving to church,
You said
so,
it was like a sunny day.
Yeah, it was just a sunny day. Go to church, get done with church. We leave. My sister and her husband, the one that I was roommates with before, so they go to the same church, and so we're driving home, and we turn, there's a spot where she goes straight, and I turn, and I remember waving to her, turning the corner, and then I wake up 2 days later. Like, I don't remember anything from that point forward, except for what I'll explain. But so what happened is we drove like a half a mile up the road, hit some black ice, and the car was spinning back and forth and across the center line, and there's like an SUV coming down the hill and just broadsides us. And
this is 4 months.
Yeah.
After.
Right. Yeah. So from October 28th to February, 24th, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just 4 months. And so I don't know if I was conscious at the scene or not. I had a really severe concussion. I broke some ribs, but the passenger side of the car is all the way across the center line. And so Caden was in a car seat. He's, 4 months old. At this point, he's 8 months old. He's sitting in this car seat, like a carry seat, and the truck hit his door, and Jonah was behind me. And so I basically, I can tell you the details of what happened and then go kind of backwards. But so Jonah, his spinal cord was severed instantly, like whiplash from getting hit sideways, So he's gone already at the scene, but they get him on life support, get him to the hospital. And Caden, the paramedics said they didn't even know he was in the car. He wasn't even crying. I think he was just in shock, But they were cutting away the airbags to get to Jonah, and there's Caden, just laying in his car seat covered in glass. And so he actually had like a fracture.
And you said he was awake too.
He was awake, yeah, just looking up at him.
Wow.
He did have a fracture in his skull, but it was whatever the medical term for that is, where it didn't move. So they didn't have to do anything for it to heal other than just leave it alone. So he's just a miracle. I don't know how he survived.
Yeah.
And
Jonah, whoa.
And so they take all three of us to the hospital in 3 different ambulances. I think airlifted Jonah. So my mom, I kind of pieced things together from my other family members, but no one can remember very much. My mom said that she had gotten to the hospital. Someone had told her, I think someone from church saw my car. It might have been my brother-in-law, and called and said, I think Todd was in an accident, but the police wouldn't let him down the road. So my parents are at the hospital, but no one knows anything. They brought in 2 boys with no identification.
Right.
And me, And so my mom's walking through the hospital trying to figure out where people are, and she's been told one boy is worse than the other, but nothing else. And she sees a nurse carrying Caden, and she's just like, "That's my boy," and she like takes him in. So she found Caden, but no one knew where Jonah was. And when all this is going on, I'm just like in this weird like mental state.
Total shock and concussion.
I'm just like not even aware of anything that's happening, but it's weird. It's the only way I can describe it. It was like almost like an out of body experience. Like it was like God was protecting my brain because I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And so it sounds weird, but I remember being like watching stuff happen to me from like up here.
Yes.
And it was nothing like I was dead or anything.
No.
But just God was showing me what was happening without me being there, so that when I woke up, I would already know is how it felt. And
no, I actually just listened to another podcast of a pastor who's just written a book on near death and death experiences where someone's come back, and they there's many similar stories of that type of thing, and it very well could be God's protection the way he just ordered it. So you're saying it's like out of body, and you're seeing this.
Yeah, like I saw myself. There was the one thing I remember specifically, which is how I knew about Jonah, was that I remember them. I was still on a gurney that rolled,
right.
And they rolled me down the hall to his room, and they picked me up and put me on his bed, and I'm just holding him. And then my family and some pastors from the church are surrounding the bed, and they were just praying. And I remember watching it from above, not like seeing it with my eyes,
Right. Like you saw yourself in that bed in that moment, surrounded. Okay,
right.
Yeah.
And I knew Jonah was gone, even though he was on machines. God, I don't remember how it's not like I heard a voice, but
right.
I knew he was gone. And which is important for when I woke up, because he's still on machines, and the doctors are like, well, he's got no brainwaves. We're pretty sure we know he's gone, but that's a difficult thing, And it was no doubt in my mind because God had revealed that, and medically speaking, it was obvious, but so I remember going after I kind of came to myself or whatever. I remember going down to the hall again in a wheelchair to see him, and just holding his hand and just being like, this is just his body. I know he's not here, And I feel like I don't necessarily think this holds up theologically anymore or whatever, but in the moment, my justification was that he needed his mom, and I know that's not why he died or whatever. I mean, I don't,
right.
But like, I just felt
but it was comforting.
There was something.
You said it was like the spark had gone
something
out of
had changed
eyes.
in him, and I'm like, he needed to be with her, and it helped me process it in a way that made it make sense.
Yeah.
I think now as I processed through it, it was really an attack because we had just figured out this Easter plan, and we were like, God was working.
Yeah.
And suddenly this happens.
Got news reporters, people in the community.
Yeah.
It's this testimony
to
redemption.
Yeah.
Like you had said.
And so so at that point, so we say goodbye to Jonah and have his funeral. And it's like, it was, in a lot of ways, like his funeral was easier because we just done it. It was like, it felt like,
that's hard to say, but that's
it's hard
the
to
reality.
say, but it was like, it was harder for me to lose him in some senses, which it's totally different. Like no grief is the same. Yeah. But a child versus a spouse. And there were certain parts of that were harder. And just because he's so young, and but we just kind of did a smaller funeral with him, just family and all that. And we did a big open house so people could come. But and so so before that though, so I'd gone down. Like I said, I was kind of like became aware of what was happening, and I was still in the hospital. And Tim Nelson came in to see me. He'd already been there, like I said, to pray and stuff, but I wasn't aware of what was happening. And so then he knew. It's funny because you talk to people and nobody can remember exactly what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know how anybody knew when I was like not there and when I was back.
Yeah.
I just know for myself when I started remembering things, like when I felt like, okay, now I'm back in reality. And he came to see me, and he's like, yeah, just like trying to be really, consoling and stuff. And I'm like, Tim, we still have to do Easter. And he's like, oh, no, it's not even on. Like, we're not going to talk about that. I'm like, we can't not do it. You know what I mean? Like, what does that say about us? What does that say about us if we just, we're celebrating all this stuff God's doing, and we're saying that he's in control and that we're trusting him, and then something else happens and we're like, oh, never mind,
Wow. So even in the hospital, you were like, we're still doing Easter.
Yeah, I remember whoops.
That's right.
Siri didn't understand that.
Siri wanted to join the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, because that was when I knew that he was going to say that.
Right.
He was going to say no. And I just felt convicted that we needed to do it. And it ended up being one of the biggest services Bridgeway ever did.
Wow.
And,
so you went through with it.
And so we went through, and there was people, it was just like so many stories of life change that happened from that. And people that, like there was for one specific one, that there was a family that didn't go to our church who around that same time, another lady that worked at the church that was part of the programming team and stuff. It was a friend of hers. Her daughter had been in a severe snowmobile accident, and they thought she was going to die, and she recovered, but she had some brain damage, and she had some cognitive things she was working through, and they didn't have insurance. Like I don't remember the details, but they couldn't pay for the hospital bills. Right. They were struggling, and so we had just taken some money and just anonymously given it to them, and they wanted to know who gave it to them, and so they showed up at that service because they wanted to thank me for helping, and I'm like, didn't even know me, and they're like, why would you do that? Why would you give us money? You don't even know us,
right.
Because they weren't Christians. And just seeing stuff like that, where God was
they came on Easter.
Yeah, they came on Easter, and so just seeing God do those kind of things, it just made it all make sense a little bit, And so then I think where I'm at in the storyline. So we
this would be Jonah's funeral.
Yeah, so
or this is after Jonah's funeral.
Yeah, so then basically at that point, I guess it was, so I was supposed to go back. I obviously wasn't working again for a little while. The bosses had just said, just take a leave of absence, And they kept paying my checks for a while and different things. And honestly, like so many people were donating to me that it didn't really matter. Like,
wow.
And so I was like, all right, I'm just gonna figure things. I need to be a dad to Jonah or to Kaden, and I just need to take some time off, And so I went to Tim, and like, I don't have a job now. Like, I'm just kind of like, because I had gone to my bosses, so I had like a date on the calendar, like a month out. Like, I was supposed to come back to work, and so they had planned this big company meeting. My first day back, people, congratulating or like welcoming me back to work and stuff. And I sat down with my bosses after the meeting, and I'm like, I'm not coming back to work, and because leading up to that point, I just didn't feel peace. And I just praying through it. And like, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to go back to work, but I don't know what else to do. Like this is, And
with the loss of Veronica, you were like, I need routine, I need schedule, let's go. But now you've got the second punch.
Right. And it's like,
to life, and I
can't keep doing the same thing. Something's, God's doing something different. And I just remember him saying, like I said, we talked about this the first time, like never heard God speak audibly, like, but it's just those, God puts thoughts in your brain, and you're journaling things, and he's speaking. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And, and he just was saying, it's not time to go back to work. Just rest in me. And so I'm like, well, all right, I'll just take some time off. And so I told my bosses, I'm like, this is just what I feel like God's saying. And they're like, they just pushed the calendar out, no big dad, it's not a problem. Like, this is more important,
Sounds like a great company.
And so I just I just took a break, and I actually didn't go back to that company for a long time. Not because I didn't want to, but because God just doing other stuff. And so I went to Tim and I just said, well, I'm not sure what God's doing next, but put me to work. I just need something to do. Like I had sort of set up a routine a little bit where, like I didn't want to just be home all day doing nothing.
Right.
And so Caden was going to his grandma's a couple days a week and some different things. So I had days where I could just do stuff. And so I was just going to the church a couple days a week. And so Tim's like, oh, I need help with sermon prep. And he just started putting me to work doing different things. And around that same time, they also were trying to launch a small group ministry. And so he's like, well, why don't you be part of this team and we'll launch a small group ministry. And so I just had stuff to do and I was just jumping in and doing that stuff. And so in that early time, like obviously right after Veronica, I should have said this before, but right after Veronica died, obviously I was really lonely. And I remember, I think it was like, a lot of grieving people will just jump into relationships because they don't want to be alone,
Right.
And I remember I didn't want to do that, but I didn't want to be alone,
Yeah.
I remember God just saying, I've got a plan. I've got someone, just let me be in control, And so I had just kind of been like, okay, and I said, wait, I'm going to give it a year. That was for myself, I'm just going to wait a year, see what happens. And so, so while this is all happening, there was, this woman in the church, Andrea, who's my current wife. And, I hate that current, I don't like that word.
Yeah.
But, Anyway, she's my wife. And she was part of that group, that sort of college group that we were part of. So I'd never talked to her really, but she had met Veronica and she knew her a little bit. And she'd always just been someone who was sort of like just in the back. Like I knew who she was from a distance.
Right.
She sang in the worship team and so
But you didn't like know her well. I mean, you're married.
Right.
I mean, why would you?
Yeah, wouldn't have
that'd have been inappropriate.
It would have been right.
Yeah.
And so now I'm thinking, well, I'm single now. I'm not looking to date, but I have the opportunity to get to know women outside, so I just kind of pursued her and started asking her questions and trying to connect with her in different ways. And it's funny because she was really resistant because she's like, who's this guy, wants to talk to me? And, she's like, I'm not going to his house. Like, that's weird,
Yeah.
But I tried, since I was doing like small group stuff, I could be like, oh, I need to talk to you about the small group. Like I really did, but it was like, oh, there's an excuse to kind of connect with her and hang out with her, And so,
it sounds like you might learn this technique from Veronica.
Yeah, right. I would have gotten more outgoing, but so that's kind of how we met. And we, I don't know if you want me to keep going down that.
Yeah, come on, man.
So
in the midst of like all of this grief, you start serving more at church. Like instead of running, like there's a thread I wanted to pull on here just a little bit, because I've observed people in the midst of grief, it seems like there's two roads. And some people retreat from church and retreat from community. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you doubled down.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, not just with Pastor Tim and at your church, and obviously, we said the church showed up for you, but now you're involved in small group ministry, which is all about building community.
Yeah. So there was two things that kind of propelled that. And so one was, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I felt like, I told you like I wanted to triumph through all this, and I felt like God was telling me very specifically, and this isn't like exclusive to me, but just because he was talking to me, like your story is important. You need to tell your story. Yeah. People need, and I was very much like, we need everybody's stories, and all these people are pouring into me and helping me recover. And I'm thinking, and then so I'm like, I got to get to a point where I can turn around, encourage people back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And there was this point. It's funny because one of the, when you're going through grief, like Job is a classic kind of thing that people go to.
Book of Job. Yeah.
And one of the books of the Bible that I was drawn to, which seems odd, was Jonah. And part of it's probably because Jonah, my son's name, but I read that book a bunch of times over and over, and I knew it by heart anyway, because,
it's a short
storyline.
Yeah, it's a short little book.
But
story.
What connected with me through that book, and also just through my experiences was, when you're going through grief, you're very much like self-absorbed, which is fine, which is like,
right.
But you're very much like, all you can think about is what you're going through.
Right.
And people are pouring into you, and you're just like, it's easy just to take that, and it's okay to take that. Like that's, you need to be supported. But you're definitely not looking, at least most at the beginning, you're not looking at other people, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, and so, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that's just where you're at. And it was in that mode, and I started connecting with people from our church, different people, like couples that I had known for a long time. And like one example was, we were doing this, like a church camp out, and there was this couple that had set up their tent close by me, and they were like, yeah, we're just, we've been praying for you for a long time, and, we feel like we can kind of connect with you because, one of our children died.
Oh.
And I'm like, I had no idea. Like, I know these people. And
so it was almost like it was hidden. It was unspoken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were trying to hide it or if it was just, but in my mind, I'm like, how absorbed am I that I didn't even know? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did I not know, not just in this moment as I'm going through my grief, but just in the past when I wasn't? Like, how did I not know? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's people hurting everywhere.
You just got the double whammy, and you've been like, it wasn't your desire to be the center of attention for the church for a year. Right. But it also awakens you to other people that have had this experience that is like hell on earth.
Right. And I'm like, I should have been paying more attention. And part of it was also like thinking too, like, I want to be that kind of person that people don't know what happened to me. Like, I'm not wearing it out here.
Right.
And, like it's a sign.
Right.
I want people to be like, wow, that guy's really committed to God, and and then find out that you went through something, and like, how are you still this person when you went through that? That.
No,
kind
I
of
like
thing.
that.
And seeing those people, and so that and then combining that with Jonah, where he's like, has no compassion on Nineveh at all.
Right.
And it just opened my eyes to compassion more, and like,
oh yeah.
How do you?
No, I see what you're saying. Because Jonah, go to Nineveh. No, he goes the other way, swallowed by the fish. Just in case you're in the podcast family and you don't know the story, he's swallowed by a fish, and then he repents. God has this fish spit him out.
Yep.
He preaches. They all repent, and he's still
mad.
Yeah. So is that what you're talking about with Jonah being so self-absorbed? Because the story ends kind of weird.
Yeah, it ends very weird, and he's mad that a plant died, and he still doesn't care that people would have died.
Yeah. Now I see.
And so, so it just made me want to pursue more ministry, more want to pursue people more, want to encourage other people that were going through difficult times, and then encourage them and encourage them to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And
was it around that time where you started getting involved in a church grief group at all, or did that come way later?
No, that was way later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
I didn't do. Yeah, the grief share thing was literally like 5 years ago when it started.
But you mentioned, you journaled. There's a blog.
Yeah.
I mean, was a blog that first year, or did that come later?
Yeah. So the blog, I started the blog.
And that was right when blogs were a thing.
Yeah, a couple months after, like a couple months after Veronica died, I started the blog because people wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah.
And so it was a way to kind of keep the church, whoever wanted to know, let them know what was going on. And so I just started, it was like a journal, I'm just writing what's happening and what God's teaching me. And
it's probably and I actually, therapeutic for you.
Printed it out because people wanted it. And so I printed up like 150 of them and just, gave them to people. And so that was part of that process, people coming along with me and kind of being through that. And then I wrote another book after that, just about the whole process as well. But it was just, for me, it was therapeutic to write it out and to process it. And just, I feel like,
excuse me,
I just wanted to, like, God's doing all this amazing stuff and he's changing my life. And it's taken me to a place I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have gotten to if I hadn't gone through this. That's how it, like, I can't say for sure that I wouldn't have ever gotten to where I am now or whatever. Right. But So anyway, I think that's the Job or Jonah aspect, and the compassion and all that was a big part of what he was teaching me. And then the other side of it, we talked a little bit about Job too, but just that whole idea of like eternal blessings versus, earthly blessings and things like that. And that was a thing about Jonah, or about Job, that really connected with me because I think we talked about this before. Like I grew up my whole life reading the book of Job and not liking it.
And from a distance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, when I read Job, because the shoe hasn't dropped for me, and that's a horrible figure of speech,
right.
But again, no severe trauma like that of not one but two,
right.
But you read it from a distance instead of now you're inside the story, man.
Right. And it just seemed like too good to be true or whatever, because and it's like, well, he got his stuff back at the end, but that doesn't make it right.
Yeah. It doesn't replace his kids.
Yeah. And I feel like the thing that God connected with me was because this is what happened in my life with Andrea, and us getting married and now having 2 more kids. And,
we skipped all past that.
And we can get to that in a minute. But like, it was like I saw it play out, and like, well, yes, as hard as it was to lose Veronica and Jonah, I wouldn't have Andrea, I wouldn't have Emery, I wouldn't have Levi. Like God multiplied Job's blessings if you look at it from an internal standpoint. And so anyway, that's kind of where to me that was the connection that how that sort of finally made sense,
Yeah.
And so I guess I could talk. That was a good segue to talk about Andrea. But
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So because you're still working through this. This is in the first year, right? That you.
I'm trying to think of the exact timing. It was the time frame when Andrea and I started officially dating was like, it was over a year. It was a year and 3 months or whatever it was.
But you started to pursue her.
Yeah. So
she's someone in church.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, I was trying to figure out ways to connect with her, and she seemed like a really interesting person, but I'm like, I would never have a chance to connect with her otherwise. And so this is leading up into the fall, and the fall of 2005. And so, we start connecting a little bit, and we're talking. This is like, cell phones are still really new.
Yeah.
We're like emailing each other and things like that. Like nobody has like a conversation with somebody through email anymore, like unless it's a work thing or whatever. But so we were connecting through hanging out with like the larger group some more and things like that. And so I had talked to her about meeting to talk about a small group thing, and I don't know. I can't remember how I got her how I talked her into it, but we met at a restaurant, and she, to like talk about this small group stuff. And
sounds very much like a date.
Really funny.
It's really
it was really funny because when the waitress came, she even said like, she's like, "This is not a date." Like she was like very clear, "This is not a date. We're just hanging out." And but so we meet at this restaurant and whatever. We talk about small group stuff, and then she's like, "Oh, I want to go next door because there was a Christian bookstore." Because we're going to go to this Chris Tomlin concert, and I got to get tickets for my parents and me. So I just go with her. She buys the tickets, and then we go home. And we'd driven separate, I think, and whatever. And so I had emailed her a couple days later, or like a week later, whatever, about on something else. Like, and I think it was like, "Hey, do you want to just like?" I was trying to hang out with her.
Yeah.
Go get coffee, whatever. It was something I can't remember. And she's like, "Oh, I can't go that night because we're going to the Chris Tomlin concert with my parents," And it was the same night. And she's like, "But she'd talked to her parents, and they're like, 'Well, just invite him to the concert. Like, he's just a single guy, he's lonely, whatever,
Yeah.
And so
have mercy. Come on,
so
girl.
she's like, she's like, "If you wanna, like, you can come to the concert with us." And I'm like, "Oh, all right, I guess, whatever. Okay, that's cool, Like I wasn't really into Chris Tomlin or whatever, but like, yeah, there's an opportunity to hang out, And so we go to this concert, and so we just went. Like, they picked me up, we went. It was, nobody even thought about tickets, right?
You didn't have a ticket.
I didn't have a ticket.
That's what you told me last time.
And
I remember this. You
so we
didn't have
get
a ticket.
there, and so they get in line, and I'm like, I need to figure out where to buy a ticket. And it's like, oh, it's sold out. And they're like, how do I get a ticket? And so we're just kind of trying to, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can scalp one. Maybe someone, I'm looking around, there's somebody, and this random lady just walks up and she's like, hey, do you guys need a ticket? And she hands me a ticket. And I think I turned around and I'm like, and she walks away.
She didn't even ask for money.
She didn't ask for money.
Wow.
She just gives me a ticket. And so I'm like, oh.
Andrea, you need to be paying attention. This is God ordained.
Yeah, right.
This is Ruth and Boaz, but in reverse.
Yeah. Right. So we just go in like, all right, cool, I got a ticket, And then, so at this point, even though I wanted to get to know her.
Yeah.
I was at a point where, so this was just after like the 1 year
anniversary.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm kind of okay being single. Like, I don't know if I want to date. And I was trying to, I was just like, I don't really want to, like, that's a complicated process. I don't think I want to do that again. I don't really know. Maybe I'll just be single for a while. But I still wanted to get to know Andrea just as a person. And we were very different. Like, she's like the polar opposite of Veronica. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't necessarily even thinking we'd be compatible if we wanted to date. Like, I wasn't sure. Right. I just thought she was really interesting and I wanted to connect with her. Yeah. And so we go into the concert, and in the middle of the concert, they stop and Chris Tomlin gets up and he starts talking, and, they always do like a message or whatever. Yeah. And so then afterwards, after he speaks, and gets up and we're singing a couple more songs, and I'm just like really lost in the spirit at this, like, I'm just really worshiping, feeling God's presence. And I remember, just like, well, Lord, I'm just really open right now. Like, what do you have for me? Like, what do you want me to do? And just like very general sense, and, he's just like, marry her. And
at the Chris Tomlin concert.
And I'm just like,
but you're not really even into.
I'm not even really like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
And so I was like, I don't know what to do with that, and I didn't tell her. But
that's probably not good on a date that you invited yourself onto, or got invited to without a ticket.
But so I just am like, well, I'm just gonna see what happens. I'm not gonna. I'll just see if that was real, because I'm gonna let it play out, And I didn't know till later that God had done something similar to her.
Really?
And
at the concert?
No, it's somewhere a different time.
Oh, wow.
And so we're like sort of starting to date, but do like more like courting. Yeah. And
doing it the right way.
I was joke around, like, I didn't even think she liked me for the first 6 months because she was very guarded. Yeah. Which is good. Yeah. But we didn't tell each other about what God had said until we were engaged.
Oh, wow.
We're both like finally told each other. But so just seeing God kind of the redemption side of things, just like coming full circle. And
that's interesting, because I know from our conversations and from the churches that you've been involved in, what our church is about, that theologically we're aligned. And so I have the same kind of dubious, when someone comes in, because there's always, forgive me, but at any big church, there's going to be some wackadoos. God told me, right. God told me, God told me. It's like, well, did you hear an audible? I heard an audible voice and all this stuff. I've never heard God's audible voice. And I was listening to a pastor, and I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this or not. Maybe this is a different podcast, but it's our podcast. We do whatever we want. Yeah. And he put it this way, is he said he's heard a lot of people say to him, man, I just wish God would speak audibly. And it was about a totally different subject. And this pastor said that when God speaks, it's more of an impression on your heart. Yeah. And the interviewer, who wasn't a Christian, said, oh, you mean like telepathy? And he goes, yeah, kind of. But it's more that in your heart, you know that it's not an audible voice. Christians aren't, weirdos here. But when you know that God's spoken, and then he said this, he said, I think that's actually a better form of communication than an audible voice. You and I are sitting across from a table, and as we speak, this requires more work. Yeah. Because one's speaking, one's listening, you're processing the words or the phrases or even the colloquialisms, if that's the right word that we're using here. And so you're deciphering, I'm deciphering, and yes, we could hear God's audible voice, but if he just puts it in your heart, it's like he went past
Right.
the ears, the mouth, and so like what I try to say is when you know that you know that you know, like I don't discount that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can get the wrong impression of hearing God speak if it doesn't align with his word,
Right.
or if it's sin or something like that. But
Yeah.
that's not what you were looking for. The way you described it was, hey, God, I'm open. It's a worship experience. I'm kind of lost in that moment. You weren't saying,
Right.
at least I think you weren't
Yeah.
saying, hey, am I supposed to be with this girl? You were
No.
like, well, what do you want from me? And he goes, marry her.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what? No.
Yeah. And that's how it's
Wow.
always been for me. Anytime that I feel like God's spoken, it's been through something like that, where besides what you described, it's also just, it's something that I wasn't seeking. Like very
Yeah.
seldom, I guess it's happened a few times where I've asked.
Where you're trying to
specifically-
force an answer out of him.
Right.
Yeah.
And, sometimes when I've done that, I feel like he said no, things like
Right.
that. But
Right.
like the most clear times when he's spoken is when it's something I know it's not from me.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I was seeking
Yeah.
or I was asking.
You weren't even sure if she liked you
Yeah.
or if she was just being nice.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, yeah. So that was, we kind of took our time and dated. So that was,
So 2006?
yeah,
Or was that the
No,
next year?
5.
Or 5.
so yeah. So the accident was at the beginning of 05 and then at the end of 05. So like Thanksgiving time frame would have been a little over a year, And so at that point we were still kind of connecting, but it was like, well, is this really going to go anywhere? And, I really wasn't like, even though God had said that I wasn't trying to push anything, I was very much like, I just don't know if it's, we'll just, like I wanted it. I was, from that point, it's like something switched. It's funny because I had even told her, I sat down with her like the first time that we hung out, like got dinner, whatever it was. And I said, I just want you to know, I'm not like looking to date you. This isn't like, I don't know what the future looks like, but like, I just want to get to know you. I think you're a cool person. I can see like God in you is connecting with God in me. I'm drawn to that. And so I just want you to know, this isn't me like, there's no pressure.
Yeah.
Like I don't, and so then it was literally a couple weeks after that when God spoke. And so I had just made this big statement to her, which was true at the time.
But now
God's saying,
he's sped up the time.
Yeah.
Or he's changed the perspective.
Yeah. And so then I remember I texted her, emailed her, whatever. And I said, hey, can you stop by my house just for a couple minutes tomorrow night after work, whatever. I have something I want to talk to you about. And she was still living with her parents at that time. She had moved to Michigan for a job. And so anyway, she was eating dinner with her parents and she was like, Todd Heminger said he wants to meet me and talk about something, and her dad's like, oh, he wants to date you, and she's like, oh, what? No, there's no way. Why would, and so she comes over and I'm just like, hey, I need you to know, like, I know what I said and it was true, but I said, something has changed in me. Like, as I'm getting to know you, I'm connecting. Like I feel like I'm going to want to date you. Like I think that's where, and I wasn't
straight up.
Yeah. Just like, cause I don't want you to be, I don't want to tell you I don't want to. And then I'm suddenly pursuing you. And she's like, well, I don't know. She's like, it's a lot for me to take in, but she said, well, God's put 3 values. Like she's like, God's put these 3 things on my heart of what my husband's going to look like. And she's like, if you have those 3 things, then I'll date you, I mean, she didn't tell me what they were.
Oh, you've got to play the guessing game.
And I'm just like, I'm totally fine with that,
Wow.
And so anyway, that's where, and so then after that, so her family lives in Iowa. So it was just like a month later, it's Christmas time. She's a teacher, so she's got some time off. So she travels to Iowa to see her family. And I remember talking to a friend and I was like, I feel like this is the relationship test, like we're connecting, we're getting to know each other. Now she's going to be gone for a couple weeks. Like if she goes to Iowa and
that's right,
she never connects, she never texts me, she never calls, then she's not that interested, And we ended up talking every night, And so from that, as soon as she came back,
who called who though?
Well, I think I called her the first night, and I think she was busy because she's doing Christmas stuff with her family, and she said, I can't talk right now, but I'll call you back. And then And then it was kind of like, well, you're the one on the schedule, so you call me when you have free time. I put it in her court, and she called every night. And so then after that point, when she came back,
you knew that there was some
dating.
interest. Yeah.
But it took that time to kind of process through it. But and so the other side of it that, who knows, this could be a future podcast, but like, or conversations with us down the road, but like with Caden, like Caden's whole story, but he was,
because he had a fractured skull.
Yeah.
Or a skull fracture.
So he, recovered from that and never had any problems, but like he just needed a mom, and part of my originally wanting, like being open to dating and all that was also for him, and
you guys are a package deal now.
Yeah. It's like, and he needs to be raised, he needs a mom, and it'd be great, if he had one someday. And Andrea was just like, she's one of those people that just wanted to be a mom when she was 10, like she just had that, not that she was pursuing it, like, but just in her heart, she's like,
she knew someday she'd be a mother.
She had that gifting to be a mom, and she knew that she wanted to do that, and when it was the right time. And but she was like, I'm not going to get to know Caden. I don't even want to be around him until we're moving somewhere, because I don't want to be in his life and out and whatever.
Right. It's probably wise.
And so whenever we connected, he wasn't involved, at the beginning. And then once we started dating, then we started pulling him in, and he just instantly connected.
Really?
And he was like, he was not into girls that much as a kid. Like when he was 2, he didn't really like girls that much. And first time she came over, he just sat in her lap, like he just, and he even started calling her mommy before.
Really?
Like before I think we were probably engaged. But Andrea is kind of like, I don't want to call my mommy to her married, like whatever. She was like, and he just started
But
doing
he doesn't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
What is he, like 3?
Right.
2?
Well, he was 2. Yeah,
2.
he was like 2.5 when we got married.
Good luck. A 2-year-old's going to do what a 2-year-old's going to do.
But to see that side of it too come around, and like, her being the only mom that he remembers, and she adopted him officially. Wow. And just the connections, like silly stuff, like he just looks like her. He looks like the other kids. Like people, when you tell people that she's not his real mom, they're shocked. Like,
really? Yeah.
Because, not that it really mattered, but it helped make it more of a connection. Like when we were first married and she'd take him to the store somewhere without me, people would be like, oh, he looks so much like you, And it was just kind of a cool connection that that was something God didn't have to do.
Yeah.
But he did.
It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And so you've been married to Andrea for...
Yeah, it's going to be the math,
19 years?
Yeah.
And God's blessed you with 2 more children?
Yep.
Yeah, and their names again are?
Yep. So Emery, she's going to be a senior in high school. Next year, she's junior. And then Levi, he's a freshman in high school.
Right.
So, yeah. And so they obviously, they've connected with Caden. He's their brother. There's not, there's no difference. And also a cool thing is that Veronica's family, the Eisenhoffs, they were completely in this whole process. And Bonnie had even said, we're expecting you to get remarried. It's fine. Like,
so you had the support from Veronica's family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was no weird.
There was nothing weird. Yeah. And they totally accepted Andrea.
What a blessing that is.
And so even to this day, like a couple weeks ago, we went to, one of my nephew's birthday parties, and like we're involved. We do Christmas with them every year. We hang out with them in the summer. We go to the kids' birthday parties. Like our kids grew up with 3 sets of grandparents. Like they called Tom and Bonnie Grandpa and Grandma just like my parents, just like her parents. And, little kids, they didn't even know there was a difference. Like they're
your younger children. Yeah. Called Caden's biological grandparents.
Right.
Grandparents.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Like it wasn't even a difference,
So there's a scripture, or there's a couple scriptures that I was looking up here that kind of really kind of struck me. And Job's story is Job's story. But, you talked about that moment where you always had faith and you had this parachute, but you were forced to use it, right? Job obviously was a righteous man, the whole standoff. And, the stories, your story and Job's aren't exactly parallel. Right. But it was the same thing where you had to utilize a parachute. Either you believe this or not. And right. Job went through all of that, and there's scholars like to argue, was he going along with his three friends? And those three friends were really kind of bad friends,
Right.
That were telling him to curse God and die. You never curse God,
right
there. And you even talk about in the first stage with Veronica that the anger part wasn't even there. You had that moment in the hospital bathroom, where you cried out to God, and you hyper-focused. But still through that, I'm always struck by what in Job 42, there's a moment when finally God speaks. I think it's in chapter 31, the famous, "Who is this that darkens my counsel?"
Right.
Brace yourself like a man and I will question you.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to list all these questions that no human being can even answer.
Yeah.
Right? Like, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?
Right.
I mean, it's this whole idea is that I'm God and you're not, type of deal.
Right.
But I love Job's response, and I just wonder if you can relate to any of this after all those questions. In chapter 42, Job answered the Lord, said, I know you can do all things, and then no purpose of yours can be thwarted. It's tip of the hat to his sovereignty. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. I mean, he's talking about you're God and I'm not.
Yeah.
But then he says, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I despise myself and I repent in dust and ashes. Now he was repenting for all the questions,
Right.
and it sounds like the anger, and you know more about this because God since has put you in small groups where you're helping others with grief.
Yeah.
But that moment when he said, I heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I think there's a parallel there, I think, with me too. Like because I think I said, like, a lot of it was like more cerebral. Like, it was even, I think my connections with that, probably a lot of that happened before the parachute analogy.
Yeah.
Because I had seen God work in other ways.
Yes.
And, but I do think, in those moments when you're vulnerable, that's when it does connect. And you're right. People, like how we do grief share, and people go one way or the other.
Yeah.
And,
what is the difference in your mind? Like, what is the differing factor? So when you say in grief share groups, which you've been involved with a ton, and you won't toot your own horn, but I've heard powerfully, but people can go one way or another. What are the two ways?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think either they go all in and they trust God, or they go the other way where they're like, I mean, it's hard to say. It's two camps, but there's more. Obviously, there's more.
Yes, yeah.
But
that's
you can
generally
either
speaking.
go towards God's good. I don't understand. Like, I hear a lot of people say, I know what the Bible says and I believe it, but I don't feel it.
Okay.
And I'm going to keep going towards it until I do feel it.
Good.
There's that side.
Yeah.
And then there's a side that's just angry.
Yeah.
And there's people that will say, I didn't talk to God for a year. I didn't, and I think I don't know what causes. I mean, I think a lot of it is just where you're at going into it. One thing when I was growing up, I think I may have said this a little bit, but I was like Job at the end, where it's like, I always trusted that God was in control, and there was no,
got it.
And like, he just is, like, he's not surprised. And I tell people like God didn't, he didn't wake up on November 1st and go, oh crap, what happened to Veronica? Like, he knew, it was her time. That was, and I can wrestle with that. Like, I don't understand. She was so young. There's all those, and it's okay to question all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's even okay. Even though Job, like, we can say, oh, well, based on Job, it's not okay to question God. I don't.
Oh, no.
It's not,
No, I think his questions were great questions.
Great, right. And I tell people too, I'm like, you know what, if you're mad, you're screaming at God, that's fine. You're talking to him. Like, the worst thing you can do is not talk.
That's good.
And, but yeah, I think it's just that, and maybe both groups, hopefully both groups kind of get to the same point in the end.
Right.
But
would you say that it's accurate that, so you had learned to trust God before that hellish year where you lose a wife and a son within 4 months?
Yeah.
4 months of each other. You trusted God, But that, or those moments either pushed you to deeper levels of trust in God, or you're going to step away.
Yeah. I think
so. It's really about trusting God.
It comes down to, I think, a lot of it is what your theological beliefs are about God to begin with. Do you really trust that he has your best interest, and is it really real to you? And are you going to, like Job says, like, even though you slay me, I can't
I love that.
But yeah, like,
though you slay me, will I love you still?
Yeah. And naked I come into the earth, naked I go out, praise the name of the Lord. Like that's where some people go. And I was just, all I can say is all the time I'm just fortunate that that's the way that I went. But there are people that, are going to say,
no, that's fine.
People are going to say, look what happened. I trusted God. I did all the right things. I did, X, Y, Z, and this is how he repays me, and go the opposite direction,
Yeah, there's you went back to your beliefs about God. It really comes down to, if we were to put it in layman's terms, at least in my opinion, is, does God exist for me, or do I exist for God? And so if God is like the genie that, if I do all the right things, my life's going to turn out okay, then you're going to be disappointed with life, because suffering's a part of life.
Yeah.
Jesus said, in this world, you will have suffering. Now, God forbid it's what Todd Heminger went through.
Yeah.
But every step of the way, you kept stepping towards God.
Yeah.
It's Job 13:15. Though he slay me, I will hope in him. Yet I will argue my ways to his face. I'm thinking about that is a ruthless trust. But at the same time, I'm not happy because I've lost everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it reminds me, so that you mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier, and I love him, but the book of his that connected with me the most was The Problem of Pain.
Oh, yeah.
And there's I didn't bring it with me to quote it, but like there's a passage in that book that I think is like one of the greatest passages ever written. And he talks about, he says, I'm paraphrasing, like basically what he says is, here you have these people, honest, good-working people, just trying to get through life, doing the best they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while, like, having families, having kids, doing this stuff. None of it is bad, but they're all wretched. And unless they come to Christ, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
And so he's like, what else can God do except to take away some of that false happiness, in hopes that it brings them to him,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I felt like it just connected with me so much. Like, I don't think I was I think I was. I think we all do, like, to a certain extent, of placing the blessings before God, and maybe, lifting your spouse and your kids and whatever above God,
right.
putting them ahead of him. And none of that, obviously, it's hard, it's hard for us to understand that from a human standpoint, but like he needs to be the most important. And if all the things that we're doing that are making us happy aren't going to matter, and we're going to hell anyway, then none of that matters. Then why, then
right.
It's merciful for God. And I think he calls it a divine mercy or something.
Yeah.
It's like that God takes away some of that, and that's painful to us. But if it draws us to Him, then it's for our benefit.
That I remember reading that book in a seminary class. I was doing my paper on the problem of evil, and I'd already read that. The Problem of Pain. I also read The Grief Observed. The Problem of Pain was an easier read for me, because The Grief Observed was like reading his journal after the loss of his wife, and it was just
he
so heavy.
He hadn't lost his wife when he wrote The Problem of Pain, so it was different. But
I've always liked this quote from The Problem of Pain. He says, "We can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to." And there's the famous, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And so I've always kind of seen that megaphone to get my attention. Not that you were on a highway to hell. I mean, you were loving him, you were serving him, you were, life was good, but it's still, the same way we said in Job, it's like before I'd seen you, or my ears had heard you, but now my eyes have seen you. I've seen you work. I see the parachute that works.
Yep. You
can speak to pain in a way that I can't. I mean, I've had pain in my life, but nothing, if we're comparing, not, pain is pain. But,
right.
And then the other scripture that kind of came to my mind, just listening to your story, because you had said at the beginning, from the first time I met you, it's redemption, and you don't like to lead with like the badge of, I'm the, the guy that was widowed and lost a child, and now I'm remarried, and it's all good. And here, let me, but the way it starts in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and I'm just interested in your thoughts on this one. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort." So that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes, "Who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." So he starts by blessing God, the God of all comfort, and then he says he comforts us in our affliction so that we are able to comfort others with the comfort that we have received from God. There's a lot of comforts in there. But have you experienced that yourself almost 2 decades removed?
Yeah, and I think that's part of that, that compassion side, and just wanting other people to experience what I experienced, and helping them, if I can, encourage them to keep pushing, to keep going towards God, to find that. And it's like one of the things, so you said 2 Corinthians, because
that was 2 Corinthians 1.
One of the verses that I told you I wrote a book, and I don't know whatever will happen with that. It just might have been just for me to write.
Is it published yet?
But no.
When it gets published, we're going to put it in the show notes.
But yeah, it's like, because you hear, one of the things people talk about when it comes to suffering, and let's go to James and consider it pure joy when you suffer.
Oh yeah.
But all of that, it's all connected. It's all, we consider it joy because of what it produces in us.
Yes.
And because there's things that you learn when you suffer that you can't learn without suffering.
Right.
They just, they just are. That's why we let our kids go through tough things sometimes. You let your kid get burned one time or fall on, or whatever it is, because if
they go running down a hill,
they're
going to face plant,
but
they'll learn.
And so I think the one that connected with me the most, which is kind of part of my book process, is because the book title was a light in momentary darkness, and in this,
I like that.
It's 1 Corinthians 4:17, where he says, "For our light affliction," this version, this is New King James. It doesn't.
No, it's great.
Doesn't say. It's a different wording, but "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory." And then verse 18, "While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. The things which are seen are temporary, the things which are not seen are eternal." So it's kind of part of that same thing, but just that connection of whatever we're going through in the eternal sense, especially when you connect it with Jesus and what he suffered. It's like, you say, it's a light affliction. Well, obviously it's more than that. I mean, but it's not in the eternal sense, right? We, our time in history, our time on earth is like this tiny little blip of our eternal history.
Right.
And so we can endure a little bit now,
right,
for the sake of God, and I mean, you can get into all kinds of discussions about, theological, like whatever God allows or doesn't allow or causes or whatever, but it is what it is, right? Whether
either God is sovereign or he's not.
And however you want to describe whether you're going to go with C.S. Lewis and say he's causing it, or you're going to say, well, it just happened to happen, but he's there to, either way, you get to the same place, right?
So you're going to call it a light and momentary affliction.
Yeah.
Wow.
A light and momentary darkness.
Oh, a light and momentary darkness.
Because there's one,
some translations call it a light and momentary affliction.
One of the translations says,
but just that title speaks to what God's done in your life and to the testimony of your life. a light and momentary darkness.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you're not diminishing it. It happened. And I'm sure almost 2 decades later, you can still feel the weight of it sometimes.
Right.
But you got an amazing story and an amazing testimony of God bringing you out on the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, to call a book A Light and Momentary Darkness.
Yeah. And it takes a long time to get to that point, but I think, I feel like, maybe this is, I don't know if other people that go through difficult times feel the same way, but I think there's also a certain aspect of, not that I was doing it for these reasons, but it's when you're a Christian and you're claiming certain things about God, what does it say about us if we don't live it out, if we don't,
right.
It's okay to fall apart to an extent, right? But it can't go on forever. Like at some point, we have to really believe what we say we believe.
Yeah.
And
if there's air in my lungs, there's a purpose, there's a plan. I mean, I've seen some Christians go to, but I'm a good Christian. And I mean, people that attend our church have heard me say it before. It's one of my pet peeves when they go, "Oh, that guy's a really good Christian." I'm like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
I mean, that when they came to Jesus and said, "Good teacher," and he said, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good."
Right.
And either you're a Christian or you're not. And I understand what they're saying, but I'm trying to point out something deeper. But back to the point is, but I'm a good person. Why did this bad thing happen? I'm a good Christian. Why did this happen? And we just celebrated Easter and reminded people again. And I don't want to say it in a crass way, but I think it's theologically straight that a bad thing happened to a good person once, and he volunteered.
Right.
Right. And that's not to diminish you, but I'm not saying that we deserve bad things. But a truly good person was the incarnate God in flesh, Jesus Christ.
The only good person.
Yeah. The only good person.
Yeah.
And a bad thing happened to him and he volunteered. And so, I mean, the rest of it's kind of above my pay grade, but I think you should probably publish this book.
I'd like to. That's one of the things that I've, I talked to you about.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't talk about this today that much, but when I was at Bridgeway and working part-time there and pursuing ministry and then the book.
Yeah.
There's certain things about the whole thing the whole story that I know God presented this for a reason. He helped me write this for a reason, whatever. I just don't know what to go with it. I don't, we are trying, I had some friends that have written books and stuff, and we tried for a little while to edit it and figure that out. And, traditional publishing is, doesn't really
it's a nightmare
anymore.
Yeah.
But, so I just wondered, do I just put it out there somewhere? But I don't want to put it out if it's not right, if it's not finished,
Well, I would say, Chris Tomlin's still touring. I know he's not your fave, but you could always show up and have a little conversation and see if God speaks again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you for coming on today, man.
Yeah.
Thanks
for having me.
And I know when you share grief, it can bring up those things. And so when I say thank you, it isn't just so we could have another podcast. It's, you also have to go back there and feel it. And there could be tears again, you know, and there's, you feel the things that you feel, but.
Yeah. And there are times, and even this far removed, I was telling my testimony to our small group this year, and I started crying. And it's like sometimes it happens.
Yeah,
it just
does.
It hits you at different times, and it's never gone, and it's never.
Yeah, we said a scar.
Yeah,
it's a scar.
Sometimes you bump a scar and it hurts, right?
100%. Or you feel that little knot under the skin where the scar tissue kind of accumulates or whatever. But and the name of your company. We say no free shout-outs on this podcast, but hey, listen, you've been working up in Bear Lake, so it's Rescom.
Yeah, Rescom Electric.
Yeah, so for all of your electrical needs, there's no free shout-outs here, but you can contact Rescom if you can get hold of them. Are they based in Rockford?
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids.
Yeah, we do a lot of work up here. We do a lot of work in Traverse City, and
yeah, that's awesome. So. Do you like Chick-fil-A?
I do. Yeah, because we're kind of like, our family is sort of, gluten-free and trying to stay away from processed stuff. And that's one of the places we can go in.
Oh, nice.
Because they do gluten-free.
Chick-fil-A, no free shout-outs. But I have a daughter that works there. And so we started shouting them out for free. But we also have to give a shout-out to Trace Cakes. We love you guys. But I haven't seen any Trace Cakes in a while. They are definitely not gluten-free. But next time you're up here, I'll see if I can get you some of the best pastries Northern Michigan can offer.
That'd be good.
Trace Galita with the Trace cakes. But I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah.
We'll just have to get some new topics.
Yeah, Andrea was saying the other day,
You're
not
blessed
to
to
like be like, oh, we're gonna like, set ourselves up, but she's like, there could be a whole nother like cadence story and then
a part two with her.
Yeah, or with her. Like,
oh,
she's like,
that would be fun
to hear her perspective. Whatever I say, I always get some stuff wrong because
I'm sure
I'm not very good at remembering.
No,
things.
it's because your husband.
But
no, I'd get the same thing. Even something happened yesterday. If I'm trying to tell the story, my wife would be like, no, let me tell you.
I tried.
Really
hopefully, I did. Hopefully, I got things right. But
no, we would love to have her here and then talk like do a part two, because I remember one of the things you said, because I met your son Caden before I met you. You made this statement: he's a miracle. And it wasn't just because of that car crash on that day. Yeah. And so maybe we can dive into that.
Yeah. There's something, I don't want my other kids to feel bad, but just in talking about him in general, it seems like ever since that time, there's something, God's got his hand on him.
God's got his hand on him.
For some reason, he gets put in bad situations a lot or whatever. You're just like you're like, oh, that's just bad luck, but it seems like it happens.
But it's not.
But it makes him stronger, and
there's a light in his eyes.
He pushes through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah.
Tabernacle family, if you can share this, if this you think it'll help with someone who's going through some sort of pain, suffering, grief, or just someone that you want to prepare them for, who knows what's going to happen in life? Because just right out of your story, those both came out of the blue.
Yeah.
But until next time, this is Todd Heminger, our producer Benjamin Vermilia, and me signing off.